Mhm.
Hi, this is Jodi with Real Progress in Action. I am very excited today to bring back Geoff Ginter. I always love talking to Geoff because he has such great insights. And today we're going to have a conversation about, well, I would say essentially the desensitization that has happened in our culture and kind of how we've gotten to this level of poverty and acceptance of this poverty and many other things. So anyway, before I get started, we have lots to say. Let me just welcome Geoff Ginter. Hey, thank you for coming on.
It's my pleasure. I love being here. I love talking with you, Jodi.
Nice. Well, we kind of talked about where we wanted to go with this show.
Mhm.
And I think essentially, at least for my own part, what I had come down to was the idea of desensitization. And
Mhm.
what I mean by that is that there are many things that we in America hold as values, and yet for some reason we've kind of allowed ourselves to be taken away from. These pieces have been taken away from, and it's like the frog in the pot, right? So we don't really notice these gradual changes, but when we look at the stark differences between 40, 50 years ago and where we are now, it's a huge difference. We just kind of have gone through this gradual process.
Yeah.
And that's really what's sticking in my mind. Geoff, how do you feel about that? Or does that resonate with you?
Totally. I've been using the boiling frog metaphor in my writings and my videos for the past 3-4 years. It's never been more clear to me than it has been in the last year, where people just want to return to normal. Where Biden is saying he's fighting for the soul of the nation, but then is still cozying up to the same corporate interests that gave us the 2008 financial crash, from which no banker went to jail, and from which tens of millions of Americans still lost their homes, lost their jobs, replaced with the gig economy and precarious work and less money and less benefits. And then he's also cozying up while he's talking about how he is going to be the one pushing the sunrise movement, but then he's also cozying up to the very same people, including fracking, that gave us everything that we're fighting against. And it's absolutely disturbing how people are at the very least marginally aware of certain issues, but are satisfied with very superficial, shallow solutions because they've been very comfortable for a very long time. I've been comfortable. I've been dirt poor. I have in my late teens, early 20s, 3 days a week or more, my only meal was a bag of popcorn. I understand poverty. I understand how close you can get to tasting real, actual desperation. But then, things turned around, and even though I was never, rich, I was forever paycheck to paycheck to paycheck to paycheck, always one bad paycheck away from losing everything. At the very least, I had a roof over my head, I had food in my belly, no one was stopping and frisking me. Absolutely positively, no one was looking at me askance, wondering if I was going to commit a crime if I walked into a store. I never really felt, deprived. I found solace in junk food. I would go to the movies. I could do these things. I could go out and have a meal. So I could, if I wanted to, turn it all off. I didn't have to pay attention. I could just live my life. And even though I was fully aware that there were people for whom this was not possible, even if they did have a roof over their head and food in their belly, there were people for whom that could be taken away in a heartbeat, where incarceration is just one bad accident around the corner, for whom one slip on their doorstep means financial ruin. You name it, top to bottom, inside and out, whether we're talking about African-American oppression, whether we're talking about Native American oppression, whether we're talking about women, no matter who we're talking about, It's not left and right, it's top down. And I always knew that. I just always believed that I had no right to speak because I wasn't anyone important. This is not me being self-deprecating. This is me having a belief, a false belief, that simply being a citizen wasn't enough. I had to be a doctor or a lawyer or someone that would have been considered important, to have an opinion, let alone express that opinion beyond my circle of friends. And when 2016 happened, clearly that's insufficient.
Right.
And I think the only difference between me and so many other people that woke up in 2016 is that I was awake in as much as I was aware. I just didn't feel like I had a right, to speak. And I think a lot of people were asleep. And even as time was moving on and things were getting more precarious and things were getting a little bit more economically desperate, and people that were experiencing that were acting out in increasingly bad ways, I think people woke up to the idea that we're in a really bad situation right now, but they're coming to some very wrong conclusions about how we got here. They think Obama was a good president. He wasn't. They think George W. Bush was a horrible president, and he was. But then you allowed him and everyone else. We were calling them criminals. We were calling them war criminals, and they are.
Right.
And then you let them off the fucking hook.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
And then the bankers, take everything, bring down the whole system, impoverish. I don't mean that lightly. Tens of millions of people, none of them go to prison.
You're absolutely right.
And we keep turning the other cheek. We constantly are looking the other way. We are constantly, because we have become so desperate just to preserve what we have. We are so terrified of losing what little we have left that we are actually risking losing that little bit that we have left because we refuse to stand and fight. In the fear of losing everything, we are headed for exactly that. Your greatest fear fulfilled because of your inaction. Because you won't look to Bill Clinton and say criminal. You won't look to Barack Obama and say criminal in the same way that you would look to George W. Bush. And the ones that you would say criminal, you're quite happy to let them walk free. And when someone worse comes along, like Donald Trump, worse for your sensibilities, suddenly George W. Bush doesn't seem so bad. And now he's dancing on with Ellen. And we're going, tolerance, tolerance, tolerance.
Yes. Oh, we're just going to move on. And we're not going to deal with the crimes. Crimes. Now, listen, I'm not a lock her up type of person. Okay, I'm not a lock him up chant type of person. I am a type of person who says, okay, these are the facts, this is the evidence, and this is where we go from here, right? In this situation, unfortunately, like we see, you talking about that reminds me of, right now we're going through the issue of Purdue Pharma. Who knew? Damn well, they knew beyond a shadow of a doubt, and they encouraged people to push pills in certain areas. And let me tell you, people don't talk about this very often, but I'm going to talk about it right now, is the fact that they do this in areas where there are economically disadvantaged people. Why was West Virginia hit so hard? Because West Virginia had issues with people were working in the coal industry. So they were working in a natural product extraction industry that didn't last long. I mean, think about what that industry caused. That industry caused serious harm to the people who were working there. Black lung. Look up Paula, why am I blanking on her last name right now? Yes. Look up Paul and look at what she talks about. She's a coal miner's daughter, right? She understands what it's like to be in that situation. Yet we cause so much harm with these industries. And then we have, this is what you call, or what Naomi Klein calls, disaster capitalism. So something terrible happens. There's a situation in this place where the coal miners are they're being hurt for one thing, they're dying for one thing, and then it is closed down because they are dying. And then in reaction, they are looking for jobs. They just say, just give me jobs, because I need money to sustain myself, right? Of course they need money to sustain themselves and their families. And so they're fighting for something that harms them and harms their family, but yet they're fighting for it because economically they need that to survive. That is the point that we are at in this society. And that is why I'm so frustrated is we've gotten to the point where we're defending people who are poisoning our water. We are defending people who are taking out mountains. We are defending people who are doing horrible things, corporations who are doing horrible things. But hold on, I want to kind of get back to a point that you were talking about before, and I want to like touch on that before we go too far. Because you talk about kind of, people who are handicapped and on people who are on SSI and things like that. I myself, I would like to tell you right now, because I'd like to be proud of this for a minute, because it took me a while to get there. We are on Social Security survivor benefits. My family is. And do you want to know why? Because my children's father, who would have been my husband if things had gone on like they were supposed to do, he overdosed on heroin. And because he passed away, because he contributed to the union, because he contributed to this society, I was able to receive survivor benefits. I'm going to tell you something. I own a home right now. I own a stable home for my children, and I make minimum wage. But the only way that I can afford this stable living environment for my children is because my former fiance worked. He worked. And he earned that. So for a long time when it first happened, I was discouraged and I was ashamed. And I didn't even want to accept it. Because you know what it was in my mind? It was taking handouts from the government. And I thought, for myself, I can work. I'm a worker. I have worked 4 jobs. I worked 4 jobs my first year in college. 4 jobs, and still went to college and did all this stuff. That is not a formula for actually learning and getting what you should from college. That's not a formula for living in a productive way. Yet for me, that was what I was supposed to do. I'm supposed to work hard, and I am a worker. I have no problem with that. But the thing is when it came to the point where something terrible and tragic and horrific happened in my life. And do you want to know what the result was from that?
What?
People treating you like you are living off the government.
Yeah, which
like
means living off of them.
There's no way. Now think about it. 50 years ago, a man could go to work, a woman could stay home with the kids, and they could own a home. They could own a home and they could take care of things, and they didn't work like not 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. No, they worked 9 to 5 because that's what the unions fought for. They worked 9 to 5 and they were able to provide a stable and a reliable home for their children. And yet I, as a single mother, am working full time for minimum wage and social services, mind you, right? And yet I bring home 1/3 of our income because 2/3 of it comes from Social Security survivor benefits. I'm thankful for that. I'm very disappointed that for 3 months I refused to accept it because I had this in my head that
drilled into you.
No, I can provide for my children. I can do what I need. This ridiculous standard that 50 years ago might have made sense. Back to the idea of the frog in the pot and the desensitization and the fact that we've come to this point where this was normal. This is what we talk. And even the idea that we say of an American dream has changed now. And it's changed because, in my opinion, women went to work. And so we were able to obfuscate the idea of, oh, you know, it's supposed to be one person who's providing for an entire family. So now women go to work. And it's good that women go to work. The fact is that our minimum wage and those kind of things have been obfuscated by the fact that now there's two parents working, right? And then on top of that, credit. When did credit become such a big thing?
1970.
Our mortgages. When did we start doing 30-year mortgages where the first 15 years is paying 2/3 of it to the mortgage company, like to the bank? I mean, all of these things have been changed in a way that is destructive to everyday people and is very beneficial to the banks and the people who are at the top rung. And we can see that.
If you can pay for your mortgage out of your paycheck, that's wonderful. But then that's a lot of profit that is not being afforded to the banks, to the credit card companies, you know, to the predatory lenders, to the cashier check here people. You know, there's a lot of different ways in which they have kept us distracted, where they've kept us desperate, where they've kept it, you know, allowed us to really have our bubble shrunk and shrunk and shrunk and shrunk, where there's not enough room in our heads because there's not enough time in the day to be able to really identify what's been going on in education and for how long it's been going on for, what's been going on in housing and for how long has it been going on for, you know, and how this all relates to rents and redlining and food deserts and healthcare, you know, and hospitals closing in rural areas. You know, all these things matter. You know, we got rid of the draft, you know, in the early to mid 1970s. So we clearly have to make sure that we can't have full employment anymore, because if we don't have the draft, we're going to need to incentivize generation after generation after generation to sign up. Somehow, some way, the military has got to have its cannon fodder. And they're going to get it one way or the other. If we do have full employment, expect there to be a draft coming back. I'm not saying there should, but expect that fight.
No, I think you're absolutely right.
Because we're absolutely not, positively not going to have a posture of peace. That's not profitable. Peace and profit may both begin with P, but they have nothing whatsoever to do with one another. Not from the military standpoint. Peace is very profitable, you know, for business. Peace is very profitable for, you know, social economic security. It's not profitable for Lockheed Martin.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, there's a lot of reasons, you know, there's no one magic bullet, you know, that's going to solve everything, because they attacked us from multiple angles. And we, you know, the war generation coming after World War II, going through the boom of the 50s and the 60s, fat, well-fed. You know, those of us that were, obviously, you know, Native Americans and African Americans and other marginalized communities, not so much, you know, but you didn't hear about them, you know, all that much on the three networks, you know. PBS, yeah, on PBS, you'd be able to see James Baldwin, you'd be able to see Ralph Nader, you'd be able to see Malcolm X, you know, on these programs. But not on ABC, not on NBC, not on CBS. You know, getting, you know, cable news has really just made everything so much worse.
No, and the fact that everybody's kind of like in a bubble. Like I have a conversation with my mother in like, my mother is amazing. She's a wonderful person, but we are living in different political realities. Yeah. I mean, based on what the information that she is being told, and the information that I am being told, it's completely separate worlds. And it's very interesting, especially when you look through the context of the fact that it was 6 and now it's 5
corporations. Yeah.
Yes.
That own 90% of the media.
It's amazing. It's amazing to me. And yet, you know, there's no questioning that source when, you know, when I say this is the actual evidence. There's not like a really a reaction to that.
Well, the thing is, you're going to have people that say, you know, where'd you get that? Well, I got it from Breitbart. Oh, you can't trust anything that's from Breitbart. And yet, at the same time, you don't question the New York Times? You don't question MSNBC? Are you kidding me? You think Fox News is the only one that engages in propaganda?
Oh,
You think
now not
CNN
Fox
has
News
no-
because they admitted that, the selection thing, so they're out now. They're out now
Yeah.
because they
Absolutely. But it's just one of these things, I run into so many people who consider themselves to be informed voters.
Mhm.
You're an informed voter and you were excited by Joe Biden. That actually made you excited and you call yourself informed. I really don't think that you are. I think you're indoctrinated.
Uh-huh.
They both begin with I. Again, don't confuse the two words just because there's a similar spelling. No, you're
But of
indoctrinated.
course, that would be flipped on its head. You know what I mean? If you're talking to somebody from the other side, it would be flipped on its head. Well, no, you're indoctrinated. Like my father will tell me, he talks about like my generation. Well, that's why you feel that way because it's your generation.
Yeah.
It's a product of, that's what you're being told.
Uh-huh.
That's, you know what I mean? And I understand that to a point, except for the fact that, right now we can't agree on facts, right?
Mhm.
But here's what really bothers me about it is that now I don't know if you know very much about me. My grandmother and my father founded a homeless shelter.
Oh, wow.
It started out as a home share. My grandfather, both of my grandfathers were pastors, but I'm speaking about one who was a Nazarene pastor. He would do sermons in his living room. I mean, it was like, he was very, just what do they call it? A seeding. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
He was planting seeds for missions. You know what I mean? In America.
Mhm.
And so he would go around and he would start churches. That was the thing. Both my grandfathers, I have a lot of respect for them. They had beautiful, wonderful values. So does my dad. So does my mom. They have these very core values, and these are the same things that they taught me. And I'm not trying to get very personal. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to illustrate the fact that there are people with very good intentions and
Mhm.
very good hearts who somehow support and defend children in cages on the border.
Sure.
They defend putting more red tape in the way for people who are suffering and people who need help.
Mhm.
They still defend these things. These are the things that actually happen, and have an extremely detrimental effect on people's lives. And yet these are people who are somehow manipulated into supporting those things.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I don't understand how
That's
we get back from that.
I don't know that we do. I'm going to be perfectly blunt here. At this particular point, because again, I think I've said this before, I'll say it again. My greatest fear was not a second Trump presidency, as horrific as that would have been.
Hmm.
My fear is being played out right now with Joe Biden in the White House, Kamala Harris in the wings, and a great number of people who were awake, now comfortable, thinking that the disaster is past. Joe's going to get it done. He wasn't my first choice, but he's better than Trump. Ergo, mission accomplished. All is well. I can go back to brunch now.
My mother said congratulations to me.
Oh, really?
And I was like, what? Like, that was the first thing she said after they called it, and it was 270. She's like, and I'm like, this is not a celebration.
This is no.
This is not. This is. You know what this is? This is the beginning of the fight. We just know now that who we're fighting.
Yeah.
That's how we know. We can strategize now because we know who we're fighting. You know what I mean? And that, like you're saying,
but there's a lot fewer of us.
There are a lot of people who are just going to go back to sleep, go back to brunch, like they say, and all that kind of stuff. But I do believe that there are a lot of people who are still who understand.
There are, but how many?
Oh, and I hope plenty.
This is the thing. I hope so too. But how many people? When I post something critical of Joe Biden, tell me that it's too early. Just wait until after. You can't wait until after the inauguration. I thought I only had to wait until after the election.
Oh, you have to see. Emma Vigeland put up something, I think it was on Twitter or Instagram or something, and it was like a circle. And it said, this is, when you can, here's when you can criticize the Democrats. And it was like, after the, pre-election, and then, no, this is why. And then, after the election, then during the time of blah, blah. And there's always a reason why you can't criticize the Democrats.
Basically, between the hours of 3 and 3:05 p.m. on a day that ends in Y. That's it. So to all these people, I say, fuck you. I didn't wait until the election was over. I went full-throated. I'm not waiting until after the inauguration. He's filling up his cabinet right now. He's filling them up with people who have no vested interest in taking care of you or making sure that the next disaster doesn't hit you in the fanny. And are you going to wait for that point before you actually get active? Are you going to wait for your loved ones to be in the hospital before you're actually going to start saying something about the healthcare system in this country? Are you going to wait until it's your house that's being taken away, before you actually start saying something about the housing and the predatory lending and the banking system? Are you going to wait until it's your son that gets called to fight in Venezuela, for a war that suddenly now you don't quite believe in, but you voted and were excited about every piece of the puzzle that went directly to that conflict coming? Are you going to wait until everything has been taken from you? It's going to be too late by then.
You're absolutely right. I want to seize on what you said about COVID, because this is another kind of, in my mind, an example of this kind of desensitization. Mm-hmm. Think about it. In the beginning, when COVID was first starting to ramp up, and we were first really starting to realize that, hey, this is serious, and we really need to take precautions, and we need to do this and that. And people were putting it. When was it? It was when we got to about 2,000 deaths a night, a day, 2,000 deaths a day. Guess where we are now? 2,000 deaths a day. And people, it's like you don't even hear about it. You don't have like the daily press conferences. You don't have any of that kind of stuff. And yet 2,000 Americans are dying a day.
Well, I'm waiting for, I'm waiting, still waiting. I still bring it up all the time. The third leading cause of death in this country, medical errors in hospitals, to the tune of 225,000 to 440,000 people per year. Per year. This is for-profit healthcare at work. People who have insurance, who have what would otherwise be considered excellent health insurance, and they are dying because the resources that are needed to save their lives are lining the pockets of people who don't want to pay.
Let me tell you something. I just heard this interesting story the other day, and I want to share it right here because I think it perfectly complements what you're saying. Is that it was a doctor whose wife had contracted COVID-19. And so she was in the hospital, and she had a private room in the hospital. Now I immediately think of, of course, Trump, and you're like, wow, like he was fine. It's okay. Oh, he was fine. Okay, that's interesting. Chris Christie checked himself in, and he had a private room and blah, 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 and all this kind of stuff. Now, that is not anything that average people would have. Now, what's interesting about this story is it's talking about, it was a doctor's wife. And so there were people who were also in that unit, but she had a private room, and she was prioritized as, I forget what they called it, but it was like, a special patient, an important patient or something like that. She was fine while everyone else was dying. And to me, I know this is anecdotal and it's secondhand. I did not experience this. This is not a person that I know. This is a story that I heard. But to me, it exemplifies, I was really frustrated, and not in a bad way. I don't wish harm on anyone, right? But I was really frustrated with, of course, the way that everything was handled when Trump, had COVID and then he came back, blah, 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 and all these kind of things. And I just thought, that's not the way it works for everyone else. So we have like people who are in the Republican Party, all these people who are at the, for Amy Coney Barrett, all these people who are at these events for her and all this kind of stuff. And yet they were fine because they're high up on the ladder. You know what I mean? There are people who would have a private room. So this is a nurse that I was hearing this from who was talking about how she had been assigned to the COVID unit, and yet every time, when someone needed immediate help, she had to get all dressed, she had to get all suited up, right?
Yeah,
Which
takes
makes
time.
sense.
Mm-hmm.
But that was not the case for the doctor's wife. There was someone who was always there. And the nurse was upset because she was like, they need immediate help. They need
Mm-hmm.
someone right then. And I can't get there until I get all this stuff in and, and all this kind of stuff. I'd love to include this. I'd love to find this video and include it in here. But it's really interesting to me because I'm realizing the disparity between the treatment of people who are wealthy and who are considered special patients or whatever it is, and then everyday people who go in. I mean, we know about this, the disparity when people of color go into the hospital, and it just by by virtue of their training and their impressions and their ideas that they have in their head, they get lesser treatment, right?
Yeah.
Like they do not get the value of treatment. And now I'm realizing that this is just, it's on a scale. It's on like a spectrum. And it's just like, okay,
Well,
here are the really poor people, here are the mediocrely poor people, and then here are the really wealthy people. I mean, and this is in the health treatment that they get is based on that.
Well, there's a there's a lot to say about what you just said, and one thing that is there's two things to really understand about this. One, resource allocation. There was no reason why we should have such a deficit of nurses to patients. The nurse to patient ratios. It is one of the lowest in the country here in New Jersey, but it is a problem all over the country. When we talk about
not just without borders are coming here.
There you go.
America.
Entire hospitals and clinics that have outdated MRIs and X-ray machines. There's tons of things that we can do just to reinforce the existing infrastructure of healthcare, let alone expand it. But when you leave that sort of thing up to people who don't want to be able to improve something, they want to improve their bottom line, you are never going to get better outcomes for everyone. You'll get better outcomes for rich people. Everyone else is going to have to fend for themselves. So one of the first things we have to do is take all these private corporations out. You are not allowed to pay for it. The federal government is going to pay for it. And we should be very afraid of that because the federal government right now is populated with people who don't want to do that. So we have to rise up and make sure that we have a country that has a government that is, in fact, of, for, and by the people. Only then will we be able to allow the federal government to really be able to be the one to pay for it all, knowing, because we're watching and ensuring that the money is going to the right places. But the other thing about that is there's always going to be bias, in how people treat patients, and making sure that the federal government pays the bills so that we can reinforce and expand our existing infrastructure is not going to change that. We're going to have to be able to, first off, improve the economic conditions of a lot of people very quickly, so they can actually have the wherewithal to take a look around them and see what's actually going on. We're going to have to, enforce antitrust so that it is illegal to have 5 corporations own 90% of the media. We're going to have to return to actual independent media being in the form of the New York Times and the Washington Post. I'm sorry, Jeff Bezos, you are not allowed to own the Washington fucking Post. Bye-bye. So we have to do all these things so that we have an opportunity to look at each other as human beings. If we have that and the infrastructure to be able to make sure that we have enough doctors and nurses and hospitals and clinics so that we don't have this deficit of care, at least from a resource management standpoint, then we can really reasonably tackle the deficit of care in terms of ideology. If you're a white doctor looking at a black mother, infant mortality is the largest in the world here in the United States, but it's worse, for African American. We can change that. We have to first make sure that everyone that works in healthcare has the resources to make sure that every patient has everything that they need, that every patient can, in a heartbeat, be treated like they were the president of the United States, with a private room and this, that, and the other. There should be no excuse for not allowing that to be the case. Then we can deal with, all the individual biases that would lead a doctor to think, oh, the woman's just being hysterical. At the very least, there should be enough doctors out there such that a woman should have no problem finding a female doctor. That a Black woman should have no problem finding a Black doctor if that's what it's going to take. It shouldn't, but if that is, build those resources. They are producible.
I'm just going to say, like, if you are unheard, the result of that is you exaggerating what you're saying. Like, you're going to become more, you're going to express it more fully because you don't feel like people are understanding. Like, no, I am in pain right now. Yeah. I may be talking to you calmly, but then that's the product of it. So I think there are a lot of situations that I think what it comes down to, essentially, and you said it, you hit the nail on the head, is what are our priorities, right? And so what is the priority in healthcare? And so we're having this conversation. I mean, one thing that really got to me in the beginning of this whole COVID thing was having Trump go out there for one of his press conferences, and he has, the guy from, what was it? There was the guy from CBS, and there was there were all these different heads of corporations around him, and he's talking about and like these people are included, and I'm thinking like the corporations are not going to save us, and really what it comes down to is the fact that it's the prioritization. So are we prioritizing health? Are we prioritizing how the outcome, or are we prioritizing profit? Because right now what we have is a system that is based on whether you vilify it or, it's just an innocent byproduct of human nature and the way that corporations work and that kind of stuff. At the end result it is profit over people.
100%. Always will be. For as long as we encourage a legal system that allows this to happen, allows that to happen long enough such that the legal system starts to encourage it to happen, then we're screwed. Government of, for, and by the people is supposed to be, standing between corporations and the people. This is not to vilify corporations. I'm not interested in vilifying business, but when you take the reins off, and you let it run amok and let it do whatever it wants to do, bad things are inevitably going to happen. That includes if you let the reins off on us, if you let the reins off on the people, bad things will happen. Business and the people are supposed to be balanced, and government is supposed to be that which stands between the two. And right now we have a government that has been captured by the corporations so that we are not represented at all. And they have become very adept at talking to us in a language that clearly enough of us believe, oh, Joe Biden is so caring. He's such a compassionate man. Yeah, he's so compassionate that he passed legislation after legislation after legislation that has killed God knows how many people in Iraq and Iran and Afghanistan, that has devastated an entire generation or more of inner city African Americans, with the crime bill, that has devastated students, making it actually impossible for them to declare bankruptcy. This man is not compassionate. This man is built in a fucking manufacturer behind the scenes to appear compassionate while he picks your pocket, while he injects you with all manner of toxins. He is toxic. That's
what's really interesting to me? I mean, I have to say, like, I've been through loss. I've suffered loss, and grief in my life, right? And so when someone like Joe Biden talks about the situation where his wife and his children were killed, and to me, like, I identify with that, and I say, and I see in him, in the way that he's talking, I see in him, and it resonates with me, like the kind of this understanding, and I think it takes like that understanding of going through that mental process of making things okay in your mind, right, about grief. So I don't mean to get into it that much, but what I mean to say is that Joe Biden is a human being, and he does have human feelings, and he does have, and I identify with what he's talking about when he's talking about that grief. I don't ever think that he should exploit it. I don't think I should ever exploit it. I talk about my story a lot, and I'm not trying to exploit it. I'm trying to exemplify and talk as someone who has been through it, right? Yeah. So what I mean to say is I identify with him on that level. Yes, I think that he's been through that, and I think that that's the thing. At the same time, it all comes back, for me, it all comes back to who is in your ear and who is telling you what the solution is going to be, right? And so people who stand to make profit off of things will always be in your ear, especially if they have money. It all comes back to money and politics. Let's be real. It all comes back to lobbyists, because these are the voices that's in someone's head. So I can look at Joe Biden and I can say he is a human being who has suffered these human tragedies, and I can identify with that. But I can also reconcile the fact that what he has been given as solutions to these issues, as things that are going to better things, are people who stand to profit from the solutions that they have. It's like when Trump had the opiate crisis task force, and at the end of like 8 months, he came out and he said, well, basically, just say no, like Reagan, right? Like, it was basically like, we're going to do an ad campaign where we're going to tell people to just abstain from it. Ha ha ha, that's what we're going to do. After all of, listen, I've done research into it, and that is not the answer whatsoever. And then on top of it, they were going to put a bunch of money into the medical solutions. So the same people who contributed to the problem, Purdue Pharma and other blah, 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 the same people who exacerbated the problem are now going to profit on the solution, because it's going to be a pharmaceutical solution. Like, to me, that's an option. And I'm not saying that it's bad that anybody has MAT, medical assisted treatment. I have no problem with that. I think that's right. But that is not the solution. The solution goes much deeper than that. But who are the people who were in his ear?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Azar was the head of the thing. Alex Azar from, I forget what pharmaceutical company he comes from. But these are the people that are in their ear. So I don't think that these people are necessarily evil. But I do think that it's human nature that the people who are talking to you and the things that you are hearing are going to be the things that shape your things. So it comes back to the people who are closest to the problem are the people who are closest to the solution. And that's what I come down to. I think
I couldn't agree more. I will go on record as saying that I think they are evil. I think they know what they're doing. And I think whether the people that create the problem are in the same industry that could be part of the solution, it's a big industry. You are a major player in creating the problem, so you are going to jail. And other people that are in your industry that did not create the problem can come up with that aspect of the solution that can help get us to healing. You should not. You go away now.
Thank you for watching Me Up and Up with Real Progressives, Real Progress in Action. Please look us up on YouTube and, of course, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. We're everywhere. Look us up, please. And if you have the means, please support us on Patreon / Real Progressives.